Hello everybody, my name is Paul and it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the first episode of the Expat Files, a new YouTube series about life in the Philippines. Before we start, I would like to explain the concept. I put the same question in different expat groups. A few weeks later I harvest all replies, anonymizing and consolidating them. I insist on anonymizing the replies of these hundreds of participating expats in order to safeguard their privacy. The result of this exercise is a treasure of information consisting of different viewpoints. I strongly believe that this will paint a much more objective picture of life in the Philippines than listening to the opinion of just one person. Some reactions I've had from participating expats so far include, "That's actually a cool idea. I like that niche." And "It does sound good because here we can hear the plus and minus of people's opinions." So, without further ado, let's watch the first episode. The question I launched in the first episode was, why did you decide to leave your homeland and what determined your choice of the Philippines? The most frequent reason for leaving their homeland was love. Most of them had a Filipino wife or girlfriend and therefore decided to move to the Philippines. In some cases, dismay with their own country was a reason for leaving it. And I quote a few of those replies. "Australia went to the dogs years ago as a great country. California is going down the drain. Much friendlier, happier people and nicer atmosphere than in the UK. I left the USA because it's a cesspool." One black American said, "I didn't want to live one more day in what I felt to be a discriminatory environment, subjected to racist cops who cared little about my personal welfare and the welfare of people who look like me. I didn't need the stress." Another person said that he is wanted in 4 states and 1 territory. Let's choose to see the best in people and assume that he was pulling my leg. Well, maybe he wasn't. Another guy who hasn't moved to the Philippines yet, but is planning to do so in a few years, said, "I live in the western part of Norway, which is moist and cold during winter season. That's a killer combination for fibromyalgia and arthritis. I get a new, fresh body every time I go to the Philippines." Another expat said, "My wife and I are South Africans, and as you probably know, people of non-African origin are prime targets for criminals in this most wealthy country of Africa, which is declining into a banana republic due to an unbelievably corrupt and inept government and its tacit support of retributive and horrifying racism. So far, the reasons why people left their own country and became expats. But from all available options, why did they choose for the Philippines? Once again, love is the top answer. The Filipino spouse of an American expat told me that the main reason for moving to the Philippines was the desire to let their children grow up with the Filipino culture. On his first visit to the Philippines, her husband decided immediately to retire there. He first brought her to the States, where she became a US citizen. Then he retired early at the age of 50, and the family moved to the Philippines, where they have been living for 12 years now. I had quite a few similar reactions from men who first brought their Filipina over to their homeland, lived there until they retired, and then considered it was now their turn to spend time in their wife's country. Another expat retired at 62. He realized that his social security and state pension wouldn't provide him with any kind of decent life. Actually, I had several guys telling me that they couldn't retire in their home country on their pension. He looked at Central and South America, as well as the Philippines. After doing some research, he opted for the Philippines and moved to Cebu. He made this choice because of positive experiences he had there in the military. The man is hearing impaired, which makes learning foreign languages quite difficult. So the fact that people in the Philippines speak English was another pro. There is some good surfing in the Philippines, and his money would go further. He met a wonderful local woman 7 years ago, and they have been together for 6 years now. Sounds like a success story for this man. Another American moved for the same reason, namely the fact that it was too expensive for him to retire at home. He didn't like the cold weather and started putting some search engines to work. The main results would be South America. But he was discouraged by the political instability and being designated as a retired old man. In order to feel young, he focused his attention to Southeast Asia, where they will treat your age as trivial. Vietnam is still in the development stage. Language and services are in their nursery. Thailand is politically unstable because of a military coup. Indonesia has harsh laws. And China is becoming expensive very quickly. The Philippines turned out to be the perfect candidate due to the weather, the scenery, the beaches, the cost, and the girls. So he gave it 5 stars. He's been there for 4 years now and learned a few things along the way. He recommends that when moving to the Philippines, you stay there in low profile and that you don't invest there. Keep your investments and your money abroad. Bring in what you need and come light. As far as relationships are concerned, he recommends that you keep one foot out, ready to jump out if it turns sour. Sounds like good advice. Another expat has a similar story. He retired at 40. Wow! Talking about early retirement. A friend of his asked him to fly over to the Philippines to be the best man at his wedding. He immediately fell in love with the people and the beauty of the islands, so he stayed on. He met a lady and they are now buying a lot to build their retirement house on. Some expats have met their Filipina online. I'm not entirely convinced that such is the best way to start dating, as I have heard some real horror stories. But some of them get lucky, as did this guy. He says, and I quote, "I chose the Philippines because of a girl I met online. After my marriage in Australia failed, I couldn't find another suitable woman. They all had too much baggage. I was told how amazing Thai and Filipina women are. So I went on a dating site and found a Filipina who was so young and beautiful, and she was interested in me. Go figure that one. So I hopped on a plane and spent the best 10 days of my life with her." At this point of his story, I thought, oh gee, now he's coming to the part where he fell down from cloud 7 and flew back -1 illusion and a lot of cash. But no, his story actually had a happy ending. He continued, "I moved to the Philippines to be with her, and I fell in love with the people and the country, and I'm still here 9 years later." And he isn't the only one who stuck with his online date. An American who had visited the Philippines before, as a service member of Clark Air Base, came to Dumaguete in 2016 to meet a girl he had talked to online. They are still together after 4 years. Other Americans also fell in love with the Philippines when they were serving in the Navy or the Air Force, and later made it their home. Another online success story comes from an Australian who met his now wife online while she worked in the Philippines for an Australian family. He flew to the Philippines to meet her in person and married her in his first month there. Risky business, one would think. But no. He had to fly home alone, and when it turned out that getting a visa for her was not as easy as he had anticipated, he decided to live in the Philippines. He loves it there, living on her family's rice farm. His wife now has a visa for Australia, and once she has permanent residency, they will spend 6 months in each country. He loves the people, the sights around the province, and he has made many good friends in the Philippines. But not all stories have a happy ending. Brace yourselves for a very sad one. This man says, "I met a Filipina in Germany and we became a couple. We worked together for 16 years, but then she left me after my company went bankrupt and all my money was gone. Now that makes it painfully obvious why she was in the relationship in the first place, doesn't it? But it becomes worse as his story continues. He says, "My friend had a hotel in Boracay and brought me here to start a new life. So I moved in 2006 against all warnings. Today I consider that to be the worst mistake I made in my life. But I'm doing fine because I got the balls and the realism to survive here. I had a nice girl, 10 years younger than me, who came from a very bad squatter area in Calibo. I didn't like her at first because she made a bad impression. She was drinking, lying, and gave me plenty of trouble. But she was 100% behind me. Without her, I would be dead by now. I could trust her blindly with money. She carried huge amounts around for me and was even trusted by my friends and the embassy. She was worth 1 million of the glamour girls here. Sadly, she lost all weight down to 22 kilos in only 2 months and died last April." Oh my God, this man really had a share of misfortune in life. I feel deeply for him, and I'm so glad he seems strong enough to survive all of this. Good luck, pal. I hope the future will only get better for you. Another expat confirms that a God-honest woman is a must to survive in the Philippines. And, he says, contrary to what many people think, there are plenty of good women here. Of course, they seek security, and that takes money. But if you find the right one, life is fine. Don't rush into anything. Check out her family. Remember the old saying, when the cock rises, the brain goes to sleep. And he's not talking about the roosters that are omnipresent in the Philippines. Here's a story of an American who was introduced to his now wife by a friend. When this now retired army colonel returned from his army deployment in 2010, his American wife divorced him and ran off with a married man. He first tried dating some American women, but couldn't imagine being in a lasting relationship with any of them. Several of his army buddies had married Filipinas and convinced him to try and date a Filipina too. It was a friend who introduced him to his new wife. He states, "I have to say that they are very easy to move into a relationship with and be married to. I found Filipina women to be very warm and outgoing, and they value their family more than anyone else. My wife tells me all the time that she loved me above everything. I never, ever heard any words even close to that from my American wife." So in most of the cases we looked at so far, love brought these men to the Philippines. Others went there to work and decided to stay on or go back there once they were retired. Like the man who worked in Manila for almost 3 years and met the most wonderful lady of his dreams. Her roots in the Philippines were deeper than his in Canada, so they decided to live in the Philippines. They will visit Canada often, but they both feel they belong in the Philippines. I also want to tell you the stories of two Belgians, people from my home country. The one left at the age of 31 to work in Singapore, but was made redundant 10 years later. He was 41 when he met his future Filipino wife, who was also working in Singapore. He married her at age 43 and moved to the Philippines at her request because she had 2 children there. For his job, that was not an issue because he no longer depended on a corporation and was now working online. Hence, he could have moved to any country. He never planned on living in the Philippines before. It just so happened. The second one left Belgium at the age of 41 to work in Kuwait. There he fell in love with a Filipina he met at a food expo. Since a relationship is forbidden in Kuwait without being married, they were both arrested and sent back to their countries of origin. But he was in love. So after 2 weeks in Belgium, he decided to take a risk and follow her to the Philippines. They have now been married for well over 6 years, and he holds a permanent residency visa. Just like the other Belgian, he never thought of the Philippines before and could have landed in any country. An American met his wife in Kuwait as well, while on a 4-year contract working on an army base. His wife was also working in Kuwait as assistant manager with a private company. They met at the mall and hit it off. There are plenty more foreigners who never planned on moving to the Philippines. They went there on a vacation, a visit, or for work. And either they never left, or they came back as soon as their personal situation permitted it. Another expat went to a kite festival in Jakarta, Indonesia, and met a Filipino kite flyer there. 1 year later, he went to visit him in the Philippines, where he fell in love with the people and the weather and made many very good friends. It was easy to get along there because most people speak English. Now he has a family there and wants to spend the rest of his life in the Philippines. A Brit lived outside of the UK for many years, working in different countries. He can't stand the cold in the UK and doesn't have family there. He met his Filipino partner while living in Cyprus. After 14 years in Croatia, he got fed up with traveling, and after 10 years of traveling to and from the Philippines, he took up residence there and loves it. Some people met their Filipino partner in their home country. Someone from the USA met his wife in the States. She had graduated in Iligan City, Mindanao, as a certified nurse's assistant and left her homeland for better opportunities in life. He calls her his greatest treasure and they currently divide their time 80% Cebu, 20% US of A. The expat I mentioned before, who fled South Africa together with his wife, who was also South African, said Australia would have been his first choice, having worked there for a year. Funny though, when I see how many Australians moved to the Philippines. Anyway, that didn't work because of age and retiree requirements. He also briefly worked in Manila and saw beautiful pictures of Boracay and Palawan. So he decided, researching retiring on a small island, away from the flesh pot and hustle of the major cities. He and his wife found what they were looking for in Tablas Island in the Visayas, and are very happy with their choice. Their neighbors are true-blood good people, and they love the beauty of the island and the simple lifestyle. They also like the absolute safety, honesty, helpfulness and sincerity of their island community, and the dazzling beauty of the beach and surroundings makes it all worthwhile. I would do injustice to the objectivity of this series if I didn't mention the single negative comment I received from someone who said that the Philippines is a nice place for fun, but not for retirement. He claims that medical treatment and medication are way more expensive than in the US, and that they don't offer good health care. Water and electricity are 3 times more expensive than in the US. He concludes, "We lived there for a few years, but then realized it is not a good idea to stay there for good." Well, there is certainly some truth in that statement. And if you consider a move to the Philippines, I would recommend that you research these subjects and talk to expats online who have been exposed to health issues in the Philippines. It probably all depends on where you choose to live. It is obvious that you won't have access to the same kind of medical treatment on a small island than in major cities like Manila, Davao, or Cebu. You may want to choose your place of residence in accordance to your own medical history and needs. I want to end this video on a positive note. But before I do, I want to thank all the expats who contributed to this first episode of the Expat Files. I received so many replies that I had to make a selection, so sorry if yours didn't make it this time. To my viewers, I would like to say, please give me a thumbs up or a nice little comment below if you liked my content. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. To end this episode, I want to quote an enthusiast who said, "Home is where the heart is." I fell in love with the Philippines on my very first trip. Since then, all I've done is work hard and save as much as possible so I can keep going back to this wonderful country. The way the Filipino people live with their hearts of kindness and resilience is simply inspiring. I love the hospitality of the locals. Just thinking about the amazing adobos and chicken on a stick makes my mouth water. I also love the culture, especially the mascara dances, which captivated my soul. I love this country with all my heart. Sounds like a happy man indeed. If you want to find out more about the Philippines and what it's like living here, then keep an eye out for the next episode of the Expat Files. See you then.